Hello, class. Welcome to week 5 of our course. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I wanted to make another quick weekly video to talk about what we've done so far. So by now, you should all have a grade for your World Turned Upside Down assignment. Those essays were a lot of fun to read, so I hope you enjoyed doing them. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with that assignment is I really enjoyed reading how some of you grappled with the idea of what destiny means and agency and human, what it means to be human, right? So the question was a tough question. Did Native Americans control their own destiny? And some of you answered really well. Just a straight out yes, they did. Some of you said no, of course not. And some of you kind of played the middle, couldn't pick a side, which is fine. But so this is actually one of the things that I wanted to emphasize in this course, and we'll talk about it again in slavery, in the slavery section. But a lot of times in history, we talk about how Native Americans, African Americans, women, all sorts of minority groups were just run over by whites and completely dominated and decimated in all these different ways, and that they were just helpless victims. The problem with that idea is that it dehumanizes these people. To say that Native Americans were just victims who did nothing implies that they were weak and that they didn't have the capabilities to fight back or to make decisions to help themselves. Same with African Americans. You'll see when we talk about slavery that even though many African Americans were stuck in that terrible institution, they were still able to make choices to better that situation. So, and this isn't to say that Native American genocide and slavery were good things. It's not meant to justify that. But what it does when we talk about how these groups had their own agency, what that does is it humanizes them and gives them more credit than we typically do. So I hope that that came across in your reading of The World Turned Upside Down. So it was fun to see some of you come to that conclusion and grapple with that idea. The other was to read, some of you took the other question quite literally and wrote as if you were a Native American telling that story, which was kind of fun and creative. Um, Honestly, when I started reading some of those, I got a little bit worried, like, oh boy, when you write as a different group, write as if you're a member of a different group, it gets a little dicey as in terms of political correctness. But those of you who did it did really, really well. So it was fun to read. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was citations. Now, most of you did really well. You picked a style and you stuck with it and you were consistent and it was easy to see where you got your information. Some of you had a little bit more trouble, so I wanted to do just a quick sort of workshop on an easy way that you can cite your sources. So let me pull up a Word document here. All right, so this is one example. Now that you're reading the Ben Franklin autobiography, we're going to apply that here. So there's this sentence, Ben Franklin thought himself a real cool guy. So you're making a statement here, like a fact, okay? And whenever you make a statement that's a fact, you need to put a source in there, to tell your reader where you got that. Otherwise, the reader could just think that you pulled it out of a hat somewhere. So, so here's an example. You have a footnote here, and it takes you down to this right here that shows the reader where you get the information. So let me give you another example. Ben Franklin was bald, really bald. That's just an example. No offense to bald people out there. So if I wanted to make a reference here, I go up to here in Word, first the References tab, click References, go to Insert Footnote, and it automatically puts the footnote number there at the end of the sentence, and then I can type in where I got the information. Ben Franklin autobiography cover, because as you can see, the cover shows he's bald. So that's just one example. Now there's plenty of other ways to cite your sources. Many of you did it this way, which is totally fine. Ben Franklin discovered electricity, and then you did an endnote where you did a parenthesis, Ben Franklin autobiography, page number. Excuse my terrible typing. But that's another way to do it. Now, the essential characteristic among all of these is that you do need to have a page number. I don't think I put it on these, just the cover. But yeah, definitely have a page number, especially with the Ben Franklin assignment. I can forgive you if you don't put the book, because I know that you know where it comes from. I know what the assignment is. But you definitely need to have a page number. I don't have the whole book memorized, and so if you don't put a page number in, it's going to be hard for me to check it. So anyway, there's that. If you have any questions on citing sources, please let me know. Technically, there's like these formal formats that you can follow, like MLA or Chicago, and you can just Google those, like Google MLA format or Chicago style, and you'll get some answers online. But for the sake of this class, I'm not really too worried about it. The other thing I wanted to talk about was arguments. So these essays are meant to encourage you to do some critical thinking and analysis. So one of the problems that the world turned upside down essays had was that many of the arguments were just too broad, such as Native Americans had a hard time adjusting to whites. Well, that's obvious, and it's not very creative, and it's not very analytical. So with the Ben Franklin assignment, I want to challenge you to dig a little bit deeper and be a little bit more creative, and ask hard questions. So whenever you're reading a primary source, which the Ben Franklin is, primary source is a document or a painting or a song or a movie, anything that tells you about that time period that was created during that same time period. So journals, newspapers, speeches, political cartoons, songs, paintings, drawings, anything like that that's created in a specific time can be considered a primary source. So the Ben Franklin is a primary source. The World Turned Upside Down, all of those documents are considered primary sources. So when you're reading those, you have to ask yourself a few questions. First off, who is creating the source? Who's doing the writing? Who's doing the painting? Then you have to ask yourself, who is their audience? Who is this meant for? And then, of course, you have to ask, who is being left out? Whose voice are we not hearing? So, for example, with the Ben Franklin autobiography, it's just him. So obviously, he's going to have some biases as he's writing this. He's going to want to paint himself in a specific light, right? So keep that in mind when you're reading through these primary sources. And those are some good questions you can ask as you're reading through and trying to answer the questions. The other thing too is continually ask yourself why this is significant. So if there's a claim that you want to make about Ben Franklin, go ahead and make that claim, and then ask yourself, why is this significant, right? So this happened a lot with the World Turned Upside Down assignment. Many of you would write something like, the Indians had a hard time trading with whites, period, and then you move on to the next thing. Well, why is that significant? Why is it significant that Indians had a hard time trading with whites? So ask yourself that question. Why is this significant? And honestly, that's the hardest question to answer. It's hard to say why this is important, why is it important that we study the life of Ben Franklin? Why did I assign this? What value do I think you're going to get out of it? So that's just something to think about as you're formulating your essays. As far as the writing assignments go, I think that's it. That's all I had for you. I also wanted to say that I've been reading through your discussions, and this last one was great to read through. There was a lot of very passionate, very well thought out responses, and I hope by the end of the week you were able to see that that issue is not black and white. In fact, I think many of you pointed that out, that this is not a right or wrong or left or right type question. There's a lot of nuance there. Like, what do we consider the individual? What do we consider the community? It's not just Adam Smith versus the Pilgrims, who were all about the communal needs over the individuals. So I hope you were able to see that. But I enjoyed reading your responses and your discussions, and I thought it was great. You guys handled it very well. So that's all I have for now. I think this week's lesson is another good one. Talk about Washington, and his role as president, and Alexander Hamilton, Jefferson, Hamilton's ideas of what the government should look like. So I hope you enjoy it. For those of you who haven't already done the lesson, I hope you enjoy it. But yeah, also, if you ever have any questions, or if you would like me to look over your Ben Franklin essay before you turn it in, I'm happy to do that as well. So yeah, that's all I have. So good luck this week. Keep up the good work.